What's going on, everybody? James here from Artofficial Entertainment, and today I'm going to be showing you how to set up various climb jump actions inside of the dynamic parkour tray system version 3. So let's go ahead and dive in. Alright, now first thing before we actually set up the actions, we'll do the usual kind of talk about how everything works. So when it comes to point climb, free climb, ledge climb, beams, there is the ability to do transitions as well as jump actions. Now, this allows you to be able to do a couple of different things, but the jump action is going to be what we're going to be focusing on today. Now, the way that you would use the jump actions is, if I go ahead and actually take this wall, make it a little bit bigger, and then we have this ledge item that we used for the other videos. Now, if I take it, duplicate it, and bring it up, let's say we wanted to go from here to here. Well, this would be used in for a climb jump. We could also use this to be able to maybe jump from beam to beam along this type of an area. So there's a lot of different ways, but it's basically anywhere that you're going to be going from one climb actor to another using some sort of an in-air transition type of setup. That's going to be a climb jump, and you can use these for almost every type. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the climb jump settings and the way that we can adjust certain things. So first thing is, let's go to our character, which for me is going to be the third person blueprints BP third person character, and we'll go into the dynamic parkour tray system details panel here. And we're going to go into the system secondary settings, debug settings, trace search options, and under this search type selection, we're going to change this from climb validations to climb jump target search. And this will allow us to be able to see the climb search, or the climb jump target search, when we're on a target. So if we walk over to this climb actor here, climb on top of it, you can see that we're now on top of the actor. Now, if I press up or W in the space bar, you can see that there's a trace going forward, and it finds the top of that climb area. Now, the trace here can go diagonal as well as straight, and then when you're at the edges, it's actually going to go outwards instead. So it's going to adjust itself based off of where you are on the object, making sure that it can find areas in a variety of different ways. Now, let's open up the settings menu here. So under the DPTS asset selection tables, let's open up the settings. And then, because we're looking at the ledge climb, or I'm sorry, the ledge climb full contact, which is the index 0 here under the state match, you can see that. So we're going to look at the jump target search settings. And this is where having these settings separated by the different state types really does come in handy, because you might want to use different types of jump settings for different types of state types. So for example, right now we can see that our search forward distance is 150, our max search height's 250, and our starting Z offset's to 20. And then we have a starting search size of 5, 40, and 5. So you can see that it's going 20 units up. It's a wider box, which is why it's 40 on the Y. And if I were to go all the way over here, you can see that we're starting on an edge, and you can see that that goes a little over 250, but that's because it's starting about 20 units over. So realistically, the distance here is starting exactly where it should. So what we can do, though, if we wanted to, we could set this to 350 instead of 250, and it would go up farther, but you can see it'll still stop when it finds that object, but when it doesn't find, it'll just keep going. And we can change the size here from 40 to 80 if we wanted to, make that much larger. You can change the Z size if you want, but again, like with the other traces, remember that if you change the Z, you're going to want to change the starting search offset as well. So make sure that you increase this value if you increase the Z for the search size. From here, you can just go ahead and take a moment to assign your settings how you want them to be. Now, realistically, like with a lot of the other values, I have set these up to be something that's going to be fairly reasonable. But again, if you find that these searches are not wide enough or maybe not tall enough, you can go ahead and adjust them to how you feel you need. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to go take a look at actually setting up a jump action. So in the actions we're going to set up first, if I go into my climbing animation folder here, you're going to see I have this jump folder here. And we're going to be setting up these types of animations. You can see we get a jump up, right, left, and a down. So with these 4 animations, we can make a 4-way directional jump very easily. And just to be that broken record again, make sure your animations have root motion. Now we're going to really quickly just make a new folder, call it montages, and we're going to work on all 4 of these at once because they're all pretty much the exact same as far as setup goes. So we're just going to right click with all of these highlighted and create the anim montages, and then we'll take all of these and put them into the montages folder here. Now, if we go ahead and open up, we'll start with up. So the way that the climb jumps work is actually a lot more simplistic than a lot of the other actions, at least for these particular animations. So if we take a look at when the actor goes off, you can see that his hands are still in the same area, kind of from here to here for the most part. but then he kind of does the jump from here. So we might want to start the actual movement here instead of way back in the beginning. So I'm going to right click, add notify state, motion warp with offset. Also make sure the enable auto blend out, uncheck that real quick. But then we're going to look at where he does his plant. And again, we're going to look at where the hands stop moving, which is right about here, I'd say. And then we'll make that our window. So that's going to be, he's going to move to the new climb point from here to here. Now we're going to make sure that use state warp overrides is checked. Under the primary offsets, make sure orientation is set to primary target normal. And then we're going to go under the root motion modifier and set height. And we're going to make sure ignore z-axis is unchecked. Now from here, we're just going to right click, add notify, and reset parkour action. And then open up under the state control options and activate state. And we'll set a blend time of 0.2. And now pretty much that's realistically it for the climb jumps, at least for these types. So we're starting at wherever we're at, going to our newfound target, and then setting the state that we have found. And I might actually move this back a little bit. Now we'll go ahead and we'll just set this up on the rest of the animation. So we'll add a couple notify tracks, uncheck the enable auto blend out, and look at where he does his kind of take off the item. So we'll say right about here, and we'll right click, add notify state, motion warp with offset, and look at where he kind of attaches, which I'd say would be right about there. And then under the root motion modifier, target's going to be the height, ignore z-axis uncheck, check use state warp overrides, and for the primary offsets, orientation is going to be the primary target normal. Now from here, all we need to do again is just right click, add notify state, and reset parkour action. Make sure it's at a nice point that we'd like. Set a blend time, and then under the state control options, activate state. Now, just as another reiteration, anytime that you're trying to make sure that you're going to end in some sort of parkour state, whether this be wall running or beams or climbing of any type, you're going to want to make sure that this box is checked, because if it is not, and you are trying to enter a state, it's actually just going to put you back in walking with no movement overrides. So just something to keep in mind is that if you're trying to enter a state, make sure this is always checked. But now with that one out of the way, we can go ahead and do the left one now. So we're just going to again add a few notified tracks, disable the enable auto blend out, look at where he jumps off the item, right click, add notify state, motion warp with offset, look at where he attaches, make the window definition, go into the root motion modifier, set the warp target name, we'll name this one height, ignore z-axis uncheck, primary offsets, go into the orientation use and set it to primary target normal. And then make sure that use state warp overrides is also checked. And then we'll look at a nice spot for us to end, and we'll, I'd say right about there is good, add notify state, and, whoops, it's the wrong one there. Add notify, and we're going to go reset parkour action, open up the state control options, activate state, and blend time 0.2. So then we'll save that. And then the last one here is down. So we'll do the same thing, just adding a notify track, enable auto blend out, uncheck, and look at where he drops off. So you can see now we literally have done the same thing for each of these animations. So this is why I say like a lot of this stuff is just very repetitive. It's just kind of defining where you want to go and what your offsets are going to be when you get there. So go ahead and just set the orientation use to primary target normal, use state warp overrides, warp target's going to be height, and ignore z-axis uncheck. And then finally add notify, reset parkour action, blend time will set to 0.2, and control options, we're going to open up and make sure activate state is checked. And there we go. So now we have set up all 4 directional animations for a climb jump. And you know, that only took a few minutes. So let's go ahead now and get these set up into our animation selector and get our animation selector set up on our character. So we'll start with the character stuff here. So if we go to our character, which for me, it's going to be third person blueprints, BP third person character. And we're going to go into our event graph, and then under the My Blueprint section, interfaces, action events, we're going to open up and double click the climb jump action. So I guess not open up, but add to our graph here. Now we're also going to go ahead and grab a reference to our parkour system, pull it in, and then pull off of that reference and just type in anim selection and get the anim selection climb jump, just like so. Now for the climb jump actions, me personally, I like just using one value. So if I pull up the compare values and just do a make array, now obviously you can use more if you would like, but the one that I like to use for this one is going to be climb jump, and you'll see climb jump distance. So this one is specific to climb jump actions, but gives us a nice distance value, no matter if it's height or length or whatever. It gives us a nice point A to B distance. Now with any climb action, so whether this be jumps or transitions or whatever, I do recommend making sure that your priority is set to state match type. Just provides the best results. Now we're just going to go into the dynamic parkour trace system, details here, system, secondary settings, and then the allowed actions listing, and we're going to make sure that climb jump is set to true. So we'll set that, compile and save. And now if we minimize, we're going to go to the content browser, DPTS assets, selection tables from climb, and we're going to open up the climb jump selection table here. So within the selector here, we're going to go ahead and add a new row in our data table. And then in the values here, we'll add one element for right now. Just to cover really quickly, as you can see, a lot of the stuff here is the same. We got action names, compare values, montage selection, but inside of the modifications here, we have some new options such as input restriction and jump behind. Input restriction is something that's going to be unique to climb jumps and transitions, allowing you to be able to control certain directionality when it comes to your input and matching animations to that. So for example here, we're setting up a 4-way directional jump, one for right, left, up, and down. So we want to make sure we're trying to move in that direction. So you see we have forward, backwards, left, and right. Now we also have the diagonal directions here as well we can use, but we only, we're setting up a simple 4-way, but you can set up 8-way jump using this as well. If we open up the state match restriction here, because we're going to come back to the jump behind, just as, I guess as a brief overview, it's basically whenever you're doing an action where you're going to be jumping behind. So if we had another like this, if we were on this and we wanted to jump to this one I just duplicated, that would be a jump behind. A lot of animations are set up to allow for this kind of, motion wise. And the system is capable of performing these actions with a simple modification. So this is used to be able to just assign a specific animation to that type of jump behind action. That's all. So, but let's go ahead and open up the state match restrictions now. And the first thing you'll notice is that we have a target as well as an active. Now, just like when we have just the target, it's a matching game, right? So if we were on, let's say I'll just duplicate this one here, right? So if we're on this one, but we find this object, our active would be ledge climb full contact, but our target would be ledge climb hang, because of the fact that it's, it's got a little bit less area here. Now, obviously, the ledge factor would change if you had beam or point or some other tag associated on the item. But again, it's just basically looking at target is going to be where we're going, active is what we're currently in, and this just allows you to be able to really control and fine tune when animations are selected. So for example, in our animations that we're using here, you can see it starts in a full contact and ends in a full contact. So we wouldn't want to use this in a hanging situation. So under the state match restrictions here, if I just add 2 indexes and then set one of these to ledge climb full contact and the next one here to point climb full contact, then now I can make sure that these won't happen during hanging conditions or beams. I'm only going to use these during the ledge climb and point climb full contact type climb areas. For me, I'm going to set the same active as I did for target. So if I just hold shift and right click, I can then hold shift and left click to be able to copy target to active. Now let's go up and set our custom or compare value here, which is going to be our climb height, which we had set in the character here, or climb jump distance, I'm sorry. But we'll set the values to be between 50 and 350. So this way we have a simple min and max value. So there we go. All right, so now what we need to do is create the indexes for all the animations, right? So we have one that we've set up here with our compare values. We've given it some state matches. So if we add 3 more values, and then we hold shift right click on the index, and then shift left click on these new indexes we just made, we'll be able to copy those compare values as well as the action modification settings. So this way we got a good jump start on these other animations. So what we'll do from here is we'll kind of just start from the top down. We'll go to the action modification here, input restriction, and we'll set this one to forward. Now, because we set that to forward, all we're going to do is just add a montage selection and type in ledge jump to be able to find the up jump here. So if we're going forward or W, it's going to be up, right? So we can match that to there, go to the next index, action modification, and we'll just go down the listing here. So next one's going to be backwards, which in this instance would be down. So we're going to go ledge jump and find the downwards version, just like that. And you can kind of see what we're doing here. All we're doing is basically opening up the action modifications, assigning some sort of input, and then making sure that our montage matches that input type. So if we go ledge jump, we just set right as our input directions. So this means that we want to make sure our ledge jump is set to the ledge jump right. And then the last one here, action modification, setting it to left finally. And then under the montage selection, ledge jump, and we're going to get the left. All right, so now if we save this, minimize. And now I'm just going to take this one out here. So we have played and we go over to this item here. We can then climb on top of it. You can see we can move left, we can move right. But if I press W in the space bar now, we can also jump up. Press S in the spacebar, we can go down, we can go right, we can go left. So this allows us to be able to climb around between different areas. So there we go. So now we've set up a very simple climb jump. And again, you can do this 4-way or 8-way. It's really up to you. But as you can see, it's a very basic thing and very simple to set up. Now, outside of being able to do climb jumps from a point or a ledge type, we can also do jumps from a beam state as well, specifically beam walking or even from hang. So let's go and take a look at quick how to be able to set up the beam walk type of jump action. So if I look at my climbing folder here under jump, I have this animation here where it's going from a balance beam, his feet are kind of closed in together, and then he goes forward, does a jump, and lands in a very similar position. So it's a safe bet that this animation is designed to be able to go from a beam walk to another beam walk. So what we can do with that is, as long as it has the root motion, we can right click, create the montage for it. I'm just going to put this into my montages folder. Oh, I accidentally copied it, so I suppose I can just delete this one. And now we'll go ahead and just open it up. Now, just like with the other actions, we'll add a notify track here, and we'll look at where he kind of jumps off the after, which would be, I'd say, right about there. So we'll right click, add notify state, motion warp with offset, and we'll look at where he does his land, which I'd say right about there would be a good spot. Now again, we're going to make sure enable auto blend out is unchecked, primary offsets, orientation is going to be the height for the primary target normal. We're going to make sure use state warp overrides is checked, and then under the root motion modifier, set the warp target name to height. Ignore z-axis unchecked, keeping warp rotation checked, and then we're just going to right click, add notify, and reset parkour action. And we'll just put it somewhere where he gets into a nice land position, which I think there is good. Now we'll set the blend time to 0.2, and then under state control options, we'll hit activate state. And then we'll save, and now we're good to go. So there we go. So now we have a beam jump to another, like a beam walk jump to a beam walk type of action. So if we go into our climb jump selector, this one here, and then we go ahead and add another index in here. So we got our climb jumps from our standard state. So from here, we're going to go into the values for the action modification, state match restrictions. And now for this one, like I said, it's a beam walk to another beam walk. So we're going to go primary target, balance beam, full contact. Because just remember, full contact for beams means beam walk. It's just so I didn't have to make another value and everything could be more consistent. And then active is going to be the same thing. So it's going to be balance beam, full contact. Now I'm going to make the compare value here, and we're going to set it to pretty much the same thing, between 50 and 350. Now I'm not going to set an input restriction on this one, and we'll go ahead and just add the montage selection in now. And I can actually see it's right here in the top of my list here, balance jump front. Perfect. All right, so now that I've added the animation in, I've given a compare value, even though I haven't really, I just kind of used the same values that I did for the others. But because of the fact that this one is using a different state match restriction, this should be selected whenever we're in a beam walk type of state. These ones will not. So if we go ahead and save, minimize. Now I'm going to take these three out really quickly, and I'm just going to put one a little further away. So now if I play, I go onto this beam here, and I press the A key and the space bar, you can see he does a jump. Now I can also press D or right and do the same thing. Now a couple of things to note about this. First, if we go back into our BP third person character, or your character, whatever one you set it up in, go into the dynamic parkour trace system, and then under the parkour state search options, you're going to see a jump search left right state match. So if we open this up, you're going to see there's two indexes, balance beam full contact and then wall run full contact. Now by default, ledges and point already is going to have the ability to search left and right. So that's why they're not listed in here. This is sort of for any secondary type of options. Now you can see here, if the balance beam full contact, if I were to take this out, we will not be able to search left and right now. So the only reason why we could search that actor over there, you can see it's only going forward now, even though I'm pressing A. So that's a way that you can control which states are going to go left and right. If you don't want to be able to do the beam jumps left and right, that's all you need to do is just remove it from the actual listing. Now, one thing you'll notice though is that he kind of stays facing in the direction. He's not really rotating towards the area. We can actually fix that very easily. So if we go open up our animation, which is the balance jump here. Now in the beginning here, we can see we have this room where there's no warping or anything happening. And we can actually use this empty space. If we right click, add notify state, and then we're going to use the motion warp with offset, and then we're going to pull it so that way it's just before it does the jump. And what we're going to do is open up under the root motion modifier, we're going to set the target name to height, and then we're going to uncheck warp translation altogether. So we don't want to actually move the character with this, we're just going to rotate them. So this means we're going to keep warp rotation true, but if we go into the primary offsets, instead of using the target normal, we're actually going to use the direction to height target. Because what this will make it is that the actor will then rotate towards where he's supposed to go before he tries to jump there. So just by adding that one notify in, let's go ahead and back to our little setup here. Now, if we go ahead and do this, you can see now he is jumping towards, rotating towards the actual beam area. So this is something that allows you to be able to rotate your actor to that area before he's actually going to do the jump. Now, this particular type of functionality can be used in a variety of ways to get your actor to face towards a location, but realistically, if you're attached on a ledge, this might be something you might want to, use mindfully, as all my point would be. Now, outside of being able to do on the walk, as I had stated, we can also do hang options as well. So I'm actually going to take both of these, duplicate them, and pull them back into my playground area here, because I want to be able to find them for my main search. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull these down a little bit, in a bit more. Perfect. All right, so if I go ahead and hit play, walk over to these and hit the space bar, you can see that we are doing the jump action. And that's because in the climb start, we set balance beam hang as one of the action types that we will use to allow for this action to take place. Now, if we move left and right, you can see that, it's doing exactly the same thing it would do on the ledge type. However, if I press W and the space key, you can see that it does trace forward, looking for a new actor area. Now, the one thing I want to note is you see how the yellow sphere is right on the edge where you would kind of attach to, similar to how he is now. If I were to take this actor, move him down, and then hit play, and then we were to go up on this item, and we were to find it, you can see how now it's in the middle. So this is a very good visual example for how the subtype selector works for balance beams. So if we open up under the DPTS asset selection tables settings and the DPTS settings, under the from climb state, you're going to see the subtype settings. And then under the index 1, you're going to see the balance beam match. So this one is currently set to 90. So basically what that means is that when we're on a hang type like this, just as a comparison value, the difference of height between that yellow point and where the next target point is going to change if we're going to land on top of it or try to hang onto it. So if I were to move this up to somewhere like right there and climb back on top of this, you can see that now it goes to the ledge. So it's something to keep in mind that this is how you will be able to assign whether or not you're going to go into a hang or a full contact when doing certain type of jump actions. But I'm going to go ahead and delete this out so that way I can make sure that this is the same height. And that's just because I'm OCD. And then we'll go ahead and in my climbing animation folder here, go to the jump. And then the animation we're going to use now is going to be this one where he starts in a climb and then jumps forward. Now, the one thing you will notice here is that this particular animation ends in a falling state. So what this means is we're going to need to use our transition system to actually make this functional. So we're going to right click on the jump here, create the anim montage, move this into the montages folder, and then we're going to double click to open this up, add a notify track, make sure to uncheck the enable auto blend out, and we'll look at where he jumps off the item, which I'd say would be right about here would probably be good. And then I'm going to right click, add notify state, motion warp with offset, and we're going to put him, I'd say right about there would be a good spot. Now remember, whenever we're doing sort of actions that are going to be using the transition system, we want to make sure we're not only using the state warp overrides, but we give it a bit of an offset. So we're going to go forward, maybe an additional -40, and then we're going to bring it up by maybe about 40 as well. So these are just arbitrary values that I'm putting in. There's nothing really specific and a reason why I'm using these numbers. I'm just kind of doing a guesstimate basically. But we can go ahead and uncheck ignore z-axes, right click, add notify, and then the reset parkour action here. Now remember, we do need to make sure to set blend time, and then in the transition options, we're going to make sure to click attempt transition. And then under advanced options, we're going to make sure that click that maintain search values. So this way it keeps all of our found information. Now we just need to make sure that that root motion modifier tag is set, because I forgot to set that. So we'll name that to height, and then we'll save. So now if we go back to our climb jump selector, And we do just like what we did before. We'll add in a compare value. We'll set it to, between 50 and 350 just to kind of keep it consistent. And then under the action modifications here, we're going to go to the state match restriction, target, and active. Now, because of the fact that this one does not end in any specific state, we don't really need to set the target to be anything specific unless there's only certain types that you want this to be able to be triggered for. However, if you leave it to none, it'll be a generic comparison. So I just want to point out that in this instance, we can actually leave the target to none, go to active, and just make sure that we're in balance beam hang before we try to trigger the animation. Now we'll go to the montage selection here, and we're just going to add that hanging jump, which is right here. And then if we save, minimize, hit play, and we go over to the actor here. Now, if I hit W in space, you can see that we are now doing that nice little jump from one to the other. And because of the fact that my distance is set to 350, I can push these a little bit farther away and it will still find them as long as it's within that range that I've set. And because of the fact that I did not make it so that way it has to be the ledge type, I can actually set the second one from beam to ledge. And I could even make this a little bit wider so that way it's more of like a full contact. Because now if I go up and do the same thing and I go to jump, there we go. Now we're in full contact. So you can see by setting up the transition actions, you only have to do it once, but then you can use them inside of these animations just by calling them from the reset parkour action transition options. So just like how we did with the climb starts, we got a bunch of different attachments that we've assigned, and then we can use those attachments to be able to follow up with actions like this that just end in a falling state. Now, something else we can do as well, which I demonstrated a little bit in the climb transition video, is that we can also cut animations to be able to make them more functional. So, for example, we go to our tutorial assets folder here specifically for climbing, and I open up the jump animation folder here. Now, for the balance jump front, we're going to take it, Control D to duplicate it, and open it up. Now, let's say, for example, we wanted to split this up between two different pieces of it. We wanted to get the jump piece as well as the land piece. What if we wanted to split these up? Well, what we're going to do first is we're going to take a look at the jump section of things. So we're going to say up to frame 30 is good. So we don't want to go beyond frame 30, but we also don't want to cut too much shorter than. So what we can do is zoom in and right click on the curves area. And we're just going to look at where it'll take out beyond frame 30. So right now we're at frame 26, 27. So we'll just go a little bit further in the timeline here. And you can see now we got 31 to 48. Now I'm going to move it back just a little bit. So that way it's more, I want it closer to 30. So here you go, 30 to 48. So now if I look at the animation after cutting that section, you see he does the jump and he goes into more like a land or kind of a fall state. Now, if we go ahead and minimize, we can take the balance jump again, duplicate it, open it up, and this time we're going to look at the same spot. So we cut it from around frame 28, 29. So we're going to do the same cut, but doing it the other way. So with the other animation, we right clicked and did the remove from 30 to whatever. This time we're going to remove from 0 to 29. So this way it has only this piece. And there we go. So now we have just the land and we have just the jump. So what we can do with these pieces is the jump or the land itself, we can use this as a transition. So we can actually take this and create the anim montage, open it up, add a notify track, right click, add a notify state, motion warp with offset. And we're just going to make sure that he actually lands properly in the position. We're going to go to the root motion modifier, just set the target to height, ignore z-axis uncheck, warp rotation check, primary offsets. We're going to make sure rotation use here is set to the primary target normal. And then we'll make sure to also check the use state overrides. And then we'll look at where he kind of gets into a good point for blending, and then right click, add notify, and reset parkour action. Set the blend time to 0.2. And because this one is going to be the ending, we actually want to go into the state control and make sure activate state is checked on this one. But for the other one, I'm just going to go ahead and put this in my montages folder. But for the one that we're using for the jump, we're going to right click, create the anim montage. And then if we open it up here, we're going to do basically kind of the same thing, but opposite, because we're going to use this one for the actual jump start itself. So if we right click, add notify, motion warp with offset, And just like with the others, we look at where he jumps off. So something like that I think would be good. And then we'll look at, I'd say right about there would be a good spot. And then primary offsets, orientation, primary target normal. Offsets will set kind of -40 on the forward, up of 40, just to kind of, send, move it away from the point a little bit. Make sure use state warp overrides is true. Root motion modifier will set warp target to height. Ignore Z axis on check. Right click, add notify, reset parkour action. And then make sure blend time, we're going to set to 0.2. And then under the transition options, this one we're going to make sure that attempt transition is true. And then make sure under the advanced options, that maintain search values option is set to true as well. Now, before we close out and save, let's go ahead and make sure that enable auto blend out is disabled, and then we can save. Now, we can also, just to make things easier for ourselves, we're going to go right click at notify state motion warp with offset, and we're going to make sure that we have that little rotation correction in as well. So we're going to look at from here to here, kind of make that window assignment. Root motion modifier will set to the height. We're going to uncheck warp translation altogether. And then under the offsets, we're going to set the orientation to direction to height target. And then we'll go ahead and save, go into the climb jump selection. And what we can actually do from here is if we open up the one that we used for the actual balance jump, so the one that's the all-in-one, right? We could take this out completely if we wanted to now. And if we go into the climb jump selection, we'll change this from the regular jump to the one that's just the jump. So this one here that we created. And then under the action modifications, state match restrictions target, we're going to make sure this, instead of being the balance beam full contact, we're going to set this to none. So this way it'll be able to select no matter what type has been found. Now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll move this up. I'll take a copy of this beam here and we'll give ourselves a bit of a kind of a starting playground mess around area here. So now if I go ahead and just play from here, we can go ahead and we can walk up. And if I press the space bar, we can go to this object. And then we can swing over to this object. And then you can see I've got another one there. So I can forward and then space. And you can see now it lands on the beam. And then I can go over to this one. And it lands on the beam. But you'll notice that there's a bit of a problem. Which is why I would recommend using the single beam to beam all-in-one animation. But if you're looking to try and set it up more dynamically, it is possible. All we need to do is inside of the actual jump land, so this one here, we need to make sure that the forward offset has a bit of a value. So we'll go forward by 20 units. Because now if I go ahead and play from here, and we go ahead and we just walk across the beam here, and then we jump to this target, and then we jump to this target, and then we go ahead and jump to this target, and then we'll go ahead and jump to this one. You can see now he's starting a little bit more, but we might want to actually increase that just by a smidge. So we'll go forward by 40. Now this is just because this particular animation, the root motion seems to be triggered a bit back, which is okay, but just something you might need to keep in mind with your animations, because now we can see we are on the item and we can get the jump option here. So now we're jumping and we're actually able to move again. So we just had to increase the forward value a little bit, but other than that, there's really not a whole lot that you're going to need to do. Now, in the animation here, I also just noticed I did not uncheck enable auto blend out, so just make sure you do that. But yeah, so now we can go ahead and we can jump across several different items. We can go and climb up here, and we can jump from here to here to here. We can kind of go all the way around. We can also go ahead and if we start up here, we have this entire little beam course here where we'll kind of walk across, then jump, attach, swing, attach, and then swing and land. And then we can also jump forward and just kind of keep going just like that. So now that we have a few different jump actions together, the last thing I want to show you guys is how to be able to set up the jump behind action situation. So this way you can maybe jump from different targets from behind where you're currently at. So something, like this. And being able to jump from either this target to this target or this target to this target. So the first thing we're going to want to do is if we open up our character, which for me is going to be third person blueprints, BP third person character. And we open up under Components, Dynamic Parkour Trace System, and go into the Details panel. Under the Switches and Modification Values, you're going to see a Jump Trace Behind. So this Boolean value is going to control whether or not we're going to trace behind. Now, one thing else to note is that we have the Search Behind State Match, which means that this listing is going to tell us exactly what it is that we're going to allow the Jump Behind trace to be able to work from. So in this instance, we have it from balance beam hang as well as ledge climb full contact. Although I'm going to take the balance beam hang out. And I'm going to take it from ledge climb full contact, and I'm going to set it to also point climb full contact as well. So what this is going to allow me to do is these two types are going to be the only ones that allow me to do a jump behind search, but we do need to also make sure to set this Boolean value. So what we can do is we can set up off of any one of these inputs that we've already created, or we can set up another one. But for me, I'm just going to use the left control here. Now, if I grab the dynamic parkour trace system here and I pull off and get the jump trace behind, so we're going to set it and we'll take it, grab a copy of it, hook in the target, just like that. All right, so now if we hook up these execution pins and make sure that when we press the button, we're going to set it to true. And when we release the button, we're going to set it to false. So now if we compile and save, we can minimize and we can hit play to climb up this item. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the system is going to look for the direction being set to backwards when you're doing a jump trace behind. So you cannot be moving left or right and do it. You have to press S or downwards on the joystick in order to actually make it occur. So if I press W, you're going to see that it does not work. But if I press S and the space bar, it doesn't work either. But if I go and press S, Control, and space, you can see that now we're doing a trace behind our actor. Now, it uses a modified version of the trace system settings that you set for the climb type. So it's not something that you need to set in a different area. It's just going to use a modified version of what you set. Now, if we actually just go ahead and climb up on this item, hold Control S, and then hit the space key, you can see that it does the, tries to do the jump down, but it does do the jump behind. But that's the reason for this is because we haven't actually assigned an animation for when this is happening. So if we go into our animations folder for climbing here, and under the jump, you're going to see that this ledge jump here, one we can use. Now you'll notice that he starts in a full contact state, however he ends in a falling state. Now, as usual with the other actions, this means that we're going to use the transition system to kind of complete this animation action. So if we right click, create the montage for this and drag this into the montages folder. I'm also going to do this for the other jump here as well. And then we'll go ahead and open it up. Now, just like with all the other climb actions, we're going to take a look at where he goes off of the item, right click, notify state, motion warp with offset. And then we're going to drag our window kind of towards the end, looking for a good spot where we want to set up the blend out, which, speaking of blend outs, make sure enable auto blend out is unchecked. Now, under the root motion modifier here, we're going to set the warp target name to height, set the ignore z axes to uncheck, and the warp rotation we're going to keep checked. And then the rotation use we'll set to the primary normal. And then the forward offset will go -40, and up offset we'll set to 40. So again, just like what we did with the other ones, just creating a bit of an offset value from whatever the state warp override is going to be set to. So this way it'll kind of bring them back a little bit. Now from here, we're just going to right click, add notify, and reset parkour action. But we're going to click on it, make sure to set the blend time to 0.2, and then under transition options, make sure an attempt transition is set to true. And then under the advanced options, make sure maintain search values is set to true as well. So now we can save this, and we're going to go to our climb jump selector here and add another index. And then we can just pop our montage we just made right into there by clicking on the little arrow. And then we're going to open up under the action modifications. And this time we're going to take the input restriction and make sure that backward is checked. And by checked, I just mean that the value is set for it to check against. And then the target, we're just going to add the element, but we're going to leave it as none. And then for the active, we're going to make sure that it's set to ledge climb full contact or point climb full contact. Now, realistically, because we have the blocker set in the character, this won't trigger under these circumstances outside of these anyways, but we want to make sure that it knows that these are still allowed. So we'll make sure that point climb full contact and ledge climb full contact are the allowed active types. But the target can be whatever because we are using the transition system to be able to actually complete the action. Now, the last thing we need to do is make sure that this jump behind option here is ticked, because this is going to be the thing to tell it that this particular action is what we want to use when we're doing a jump behind of any kind. Because now if we minimize, hit play, and we go back to on top of this actor here, hit Control S and spacebar, you can see that we're now doing that animation. And it's doing the transition and then ending with the attach. And just like with all the others, if I were to change this to the, like for example, this beam object here, and I were to bring this sort of in a little bit closer, so that way it's in an area that would be able to be found by the traces. and then I hit play, do the same thing, climb up on top, as control and space, and you can see now he's attached onto the beam. So with this, we can set up a lot of different types of transitional actions from the jumps from one target to another. We can jump behind, we can, we've done and set up a lot of different blending types and different options for blending from one animation to another. And this was where that transition system is it's a lot of fun. From here, we're going to start looking at transitions for the different types of state actions that we could use, beams and climbing states and stuff, being able to do vaults and mantles, and being able to drop down from a beam walk to a hang, climbing up from a hang to a beam walk, all that cool stuff. So we're going to be talking about that in the transitions video, which is going to be the next one coming up. So I hope to see you guys in the next one, but that's going to close it out for now. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please feel free to reach out to me in the Discord or in the comments, but I will say I'm always more responsive in Discord. But I hope to see you guys in the next one, but until then, stay tuned, and as always, stay animated.